Chapter 22. For weeks, Jade put on a brave face, trying to downplay the mounting money issues closing in around her. But each unpaid bill, each past due notice that arrived in her mailbox, chipped away at her already fragile sense of security. She was skating on thin ice, living well beyond her means in a city that devoured dreams and aspirations with a cold, indifferent hunger. But she was too proud, too stubborn to admit defeat, to herself or to anyone else. That all changed the day the final eviction notice came. Holding that plain white envelope, the weight of her situation became inescapable. She was out of options, out of time, and out of hope of finding her way back. For hours, Jade sat on her sofa, that simple piece of paper mocking her. She failed, completely, and now she would be forced to do the one thing she swore she never would: ask her parents for help. The thought made her recoil. Shame and self-loathing rose up from the depths of her gut. Her relationship with her parents had always been strained, fraught with unrealistic expectations and suffocating obligations. To reach out to them now, admitting her inability to make it on her own, felt like an indictment of her own self-worth. But as the hours ticked by and the shadows grew long across her apartment, Jade was out of choices. Either she could break the cycle of her pride and ask for help, or she could lose everything: her home, her career, her dreams. And that was something she couldn't bear to let happen. The sound of the highway beneath the tires provided a soundtrack to the whirlwind of thoughts in Jade's mind. The decision to turn to her parents for help was not an easy one. As the miles stretched before her, she thought about how to shield them from the storm that became her life. The landscape transformed from the towering structures of Washington, D.C., to the serene suburbs of New Rochelle, New York. Rolling hills and manicured lawns replaced the concrete jungle, signaling Jade's arrival in her hometown. The streets lined with trees stood as sentinels of memories long past, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. The warmth of the sun on her skin was a fleeting comfort, a momentary reprieve from the chaos that awaited her. The Rose family home was a grand structure in a field of greenery. A white picket fence framed the front yard, leading to a majestic entrance with blooming flowers. The scent of fresh-cut grass filled the air, mixed with the delicate aroma of roses from the nearby garden. The tranquility of the neighborhood stood in stark contrast to the turmoil in Jade's heart. It was a reminder of the life she left behind. Pulling into the driveway, she marveled at the sight of her parents' home. It was a haven of comfort and elegance, the fruits of her mother's success as a renowned dentist and her father's achievements in the entertainment industry. The pristine exterior, with its cream-colored walls and large windows, hinted at a life of prosperity, but Jade knew that behind the polished facade, a loving family awaited her. Entering the house, she was greeted by the warm embrace of familiarity. The tastefully decorated living room, with its plush sofas and curated artwork, and the subtle melody of soft jazz playing in the background. Pictures capturing moments of joy filled the walls, encapsulating a lifetime of shared experiences. Jade's eyes lingered on a family portrait, a reminder of simpler times when the weight of the world seemed far away. Dr. Thalia Rose, Jade's mother, appeared from the kitchen, her face lighting up at the sight of her daughter. She was a poised and compassionate woman, her dark hair elegantly styled and her warm brown eyes behind sleek glasses. Concern lingered as she wrapped Jade in a comforting hug. "Jade, darling, it's been too long. How are you?" she asked, her voice soft and soothing. Jade smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm okay, Mom. Just needed a break from the city, you know." The words were heavy on her tongue, a half-truth that only scratched the surface of her troubles. Her father, a tall and charismatic man with salt and pepper hair and a winning smile, entered the room. "Jade, my girl, good to have you back. What brings you home?" His dark brown eyes seemed to search her face for answers she wasn't ready to give. As they settled in, Jade struggled with the choice she faced: to burden her parents with the truth or to act as if nothing was amiss. The delicate dance between love and protection played out in the living room of the Rose family home. A few hours later, the dining room held a warmth that emanated from the shared laughter and the strength of the family bond. As they savored the last bites of a delicious home-cooked meal, Jade seized the opportunity to broach a delicate subject with her mother, while her father was momentarily absent. As they cleared the plates and moved to the living room, Jade's heart thumped. Her chest tightened, a physical manifestation of the guilt that gnawed at her conscience. "Mom," Jade began, her voice trembling. "There's something I need to talk to you about. It's important." Dr. Thalia Rose settled onto the sofa, her eyes reflecting concern. She reached out, placing a hand on Jade's knee. "Of course, sweetheart. You can always talk to me. What's on your mind?" Jade hesitated, the words sticking in her throat. She swallowed hard, trying to find the right way to frame her predicament. I've been facing some financial troubles. The bank made a mistake, and they froze my accounts. I need some money to sort things out." "Oh, Jade, I had no idea," Dr. Rose said. "Why didn't you tell us sooner? We can figure this out together." Jade took a deep breath, her eyes moving to the doorway where her father reappeared. The knot in her stomach tightened as she prepared to extend her deception. "It's embarrassing, Mom. I didn't want to burden you. But I need a loan, about $50,000. Her father's eyebrows shot up. "What's going on, Jade? Why do you need such a significant amount of money?" Caught off guard, Jade scrambled to concoct an explanation. "Dad, it's a mix-up. The bank made an error in their systems, and they're working to fix it. But in the meantime, I need to cover some expenses. It's all going to be sorted out soon." Throughout her childhood, Jade's relationship with her father was marked by his absence, a void that grew with each passing year. As a successful figure in the music industry, he was constantly on the move, chasing the next big hit or touring with the latest sensation. While Jade understood the demands of his career on an intellectual level, the emotional toll of his absence was harder to rationalize. Growing up, she couldn't help but resent the missed birthdays, the empty seats at school recitals, and the broken promises of quality time that never seemed to materialize. However, as she matured and pursued her own passions, she began to see her father in a new light. She recognized the sacrifices he made to provide for their family, and the dedication he poured into his craft. Slowly but surely, they began to bridge the gap between them, learning to appreciate each other not just as father and daughter, but as individuals with their own dreams and challenges. Though their relationship would always bear the scars of those early years, Jade and her father were determined to forge a new path together, one built on mutual understanding, respect, and the unbreakable bond of family. Her father stared at her, a silent plea for honesty hanging in the air between them. Jade felt the weight of her own deception, a fracture in the trust she always cherished with her parents. In that moment, in the tasteful decor of their family home, Jade told half-truths, desperate to shield her loved ones from the shadows closing in on her life. Dr. Thalia and her husband exchanged a glance, a silent communication born of years of partnership. In the affluent New Rochelle neighborhood, financial concerns were a foreign concept to the Roses. Their elegant home rested among manicured lawns and stately trees, exuding an air of prosperity that belied any hint of hardship. "We'll take care of this, Jade," her mother said. "Your father and I will sort out the paperwork and get you the money you need. You don't have to worry about a thing." "Absolutely. Your mother's right. We're a family, and we'll tackle this together. Now let's focus on finding a solution." Jade's father nodded, his expression a mix of concern and determination. As they discussed the intricacies of resolving the financial hiccup, the shadows of suspicion remained dormant, concealed by the facade of family unity. The Rose family, accustomed to the rhythm of prosperity, extended their protective embrace, unaware their daughter's request was covered in a blanket of deceit. The comfortable cocoon of financial stability shielded them from the storm gathering on the horizon, its distant rumblings unheard within the sanctuary of their home. But as Jade sat there, the weight of her lies pressing on her shoulders, her deception would have consequences she couldn't begin to fathom. The image of a tangled web, each strand representing a truth untold, flashed in her mind, a haunting reminder of the dangerous game she was playing. Chapter 23. As Jade and David delved deeper into Councilman Thornton's death, a new lead emerged. one that threatened to unravel their entire investigation. In the confines of David's apartment, amidst a sea of scattered documents and computer screens, they stumbled on a connection. Councilman Thornton's name appeared alongside a mysterious international corporation that stretched far beyond the borders of the United States. The company known only as Octavian Global seemed to exist in the shadows, its true purpose covered in secrecy. Jade's fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes narrowing as she dug deeper into Octavian Global's history. "David, look at this," she said. "I think I found something." "What is it?" "Bank statements going back several years. Looks like our dear departed councilman was receiving some pretty hefty payments from a shell corporation based in the Cayman Islands. Says here that Octavian Global has ties to several high-level government officials, including—" She paused, her eyes widening. "Including President Adrian Blackwell." "A shell corporation? That screams money laundering." David leaned in closer, his eyes intense as he scanned the document. "That can't be a coincidence," he said. "Thornton, Octavian Global, and now the president himself? There's something bigger going on here." Jade leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes with a groan. "I feel like my brain is about to melt. How do you do this all day?" David smirked. "It's called stamina. Something you reporters wouldn't know anything about, chasing after your next big scoop." "Oh, really? This from the guy who probably spends his weekends binge-watching conspiracy theory videos on YouTube?" David clutched his chest in mock offense. "You wound me, Jade. I'll have you know that my weekends are reserved for much more sophisticated pursuits, like building model airplanes and practicing my origami skills." Jade snorted, shaking her head with a grin. "I never pegged you for an arts and crafts kind of guy." "I'm full of surprises," David said, waggling his eyebrows. "Stick around long enough, and you might just learn a thing or two." Jade felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. They had stumbled onto a conspiracy far more enormous and insidious than they ever imagined. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking into place with a chilling clarity. "If the president is involved with Octavian Global," she said, "and Octavian Global is connected to the Illuminated Order, then that means—" "It means the Order's influence goes to the highest levels of our government," David finished. "And if they're willing to silence someone like Thornton to keep their secrets hidden, then there's no telling what else they're capable of." Jade shook her head, a feeling of helplessness washing over her. The enemy they were facing was no longer just a secret group of elites and power brokers. It was the system itself, the institutions and leaders that were supposed to protect and serve the people. "We should be careful, David," she said, her eyes locking with his. "If the president's involved, then we're not just up against the Order anymore. We're taking on the full might of the U.S. government." David's hand found Jade's, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that spoke volumes about their bond. He caught her gaze, his eyes filled with a fierce intensity that seemed to burn straight through to her core. "I know the risks we're facing, the dangers that lurks around every corner. But we can't let that stop us, not when we're on the cusp of something so monumental." He paused, his thumb tracing a gentle circle on the back of her hand. "Think about all we've uncovered, all the secrets we've dragged into the light. Their power is built on a foundation of lies and manipulation, and every truth we expose brings us one step closer to dismantling their empire." Jade took a deep breath, drawing strength from his touch. He was right. They'd come too far, sacrificed too much to let the Illuminated Order win. "Okay," she said, "but we need to be smart about this. We can't just go charging in blindly. We need a plan, and we need allies we can trust." David smiled. "You can trust me." Jade rolled her eyes, but she couldn't help the smile that tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Come on, Casanova. We've got a conspiracy to unravel." In the days that followed, they pored over financial records and encrypted communications, piecing together a puzzle that grew more complex with each passing moment. The Illuminated Order's influence, it seemed, knew no bounds, and the stakes grew higher with every revelation. Chapter 24. President Adrian Blackwell stood at the window of the Oval Office, his eyes on the distant Washington Monument as it pierced the skyline. The weight of the nation rested on his shoulders, a mantle he wore with pride since the day he took the oath of office. His tall, lean frame exuded an air of quiet authority, the silver at his temples a testament to the decades he spent navigating the treacherous waters of American politics. To the public, he was a man of integrity and vision, a leader who promised to bridge the divides that fractured the nation and guide the country into a new era of prosperity and unity. His charisma and eloquence won him legions of devoted followers, his face a fixture on every news channel and magazine cover. But beneath the polished veneer, there were whispers of something darker, murmurs of secrets and alliances that stretched beyond the halls of power and into the realms of global influence. And at the center of those whispers was a name that few dared to speak aloud: Octavian Global. The corporation rose to prominence in recent years, spreading across every sector of the economy, and its influence felt in the highest stages of government. Some saw it as innovation and progress, a shining example of the boundless potential of free enterprise. Others viewed it with suspicion and fear, a faceless entity with an agenda that remained a mystery. For President Blackwell, the truth lay somewhere in between. He first crossed paths with Octavian Global during his days as a senator, when a chance meeting with the company's founder opened his eyes to a world of possibilities he never before imagined. The man spoke of a future where the boundaries between politics and business, between nations and corporations, would be no more, giving rise to a new order that would reshape society. At first, Blackwell was skeptical, his instincts honed by a lifetime in the cutthroat world of politics. But as he looked deeper into Octavian Global's operations, he began to see the truth behind the founder's words. The company's reach was broad and its resources limitless, its fingers in every pie from cutting-edge technology to global finance. And so, a partnership forged, a secret alliance that helped propel Blackwell to the highest office in the land and cemented Octavian Global's place at the forefront of the New World Order. It was a partnership that brought him power and influence beyond his wildest dreams, but one that also comes with a price. As he stood at the window, staring out at the city before him, President Blackwell sensed he was no longer the master of his own destiny. The strings that guided his actions were being pulled by forces beyond his control. The weight of the secrets he carried seemed to grow heavier each day, and the lines between his public persona and his private allegiances were so mixed up he could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. With whispers of investigations and exposés swirling, the fragile web of power and influence he wove was in danger of unraveling at any moment. The name of Councilman Thornton, a pawn in a game whose true scope remained hidden even to Blackwell, surfaced, and it threatened to bring the entire house of cards crashing down around him. Chapter 25. As Jade and David continued their pursuit of the truth, another lead came forth. It was a whisper of a secret gathering which promised to shed light on the Illuminated Order's global domination. Amidst the chaos of their investigation, they uncovered a fragment of information that set their pulses racing and their minds reeling. It was a single line of code, buried deep in a file they managed to extract from Octavian Global's servers. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a random string of characters, a digital ghost that danced across the screen. But as Jade and David dug deeper, the true significance of their discovery took shape. "It's a date and a location," Jade said as she deciphered the code. "London, 2 weeks from now. And look at this." She pointed to a series of symbols that followed the date. David studied the symbols. "I've seen this before," he said. "It's the Order's cipher, used for their most sensitive communications." The reality hit them like a thunderbolt, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with a sickening clarity. The secret meeting in London, the presence of high-ranking members of the Order, the whispers of a global agenda. It all pointed to a truth that was as terrifying as it was undeniable. "They're planning something big," Jade said. "Something that could change the course of history. We have to be there. We have to find out what they're planning and stop them before it's too late." The decision was made, a pact sealed. They would go to London, infiltrate the secret meeting, and uncover the truth behind the Illuminated Order's global agenda. With the knowledge of the meeting in London burning in their minds, Jade and David set about planning their next move. Infiltrating the gathering of the Illuminated Order's high-ranking members would be no easy feat, but it was a chance they couldn't afford to pass up. In David's apartment, they huddled over a map of London, their eyes tracing the winding streets and ancient buildings that held the key to unlocking the Order's global agenda. They studied the location of the meeting, the Royal Institute of International Affairs. The building, known as Chatham House, was a grand Edwardian manor. The institute was renowned as a hub of global policy and diplomacy, hosting conferences and events that brought together the world's most influential minds. "We'll need aliases," Jade said. "Identities that can withstand the scrutiny of the Order's security. I have a contact in London, someone who can help us create backstories that will hold up under pressure," David said. They spent long hours crafting their new identities, weaving together threads of truth and fiction until they created personas that felt as real as their own skin. Jade became Sophia Steele, a wealthy socialite with a penchant for brushing elbows with the powerful and influential. And David took on the role of Milton Ashton, a successful businessman with ties to the upper echelons of society. With their aliases in place, they turned their attention to the logistics of their journey. They booked flights under their new names, careful to leave no trace of their true identities. They packed bags with the essentials, including the tools of their trade cameras, recording devices, and the ever-present notebooks that held the secrets they had uncovered. On the eve of their departure, they met one last time in David's apartment to go over the final details of their plan. "You ready for this?" David asked, his voice low and earnest as he met Jade's eyes. "I'm ready," she said. "We'll uncover the truth, no matter what it takes." David reached out, his hand finding hers in the dim light of the room. "Together," he said, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Together," Jade replied. The word, a promise, and a prayer. As the night wore on and the city slept, Jade and David remained awake, consumed with thoughts of the journey ahead. The road would be treacherous, and the dangers they faced were real and deadly. Chapter 26. As Jade and David prepared to embark on their trip to London, Detective Marcus Reynolds struggled with a lead that threatened to shatter his investigation. In the depths of the Washington, D.C. Police Department, amidst the chaos of ringing phones and scattering officers, he stumbled on a piece of evidence that raised the hairs on his arm. It was a single sheet of paper, buried deep in the files of the Thornton murder case. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a regular document, a record of a financial transaction that had no place in a homicide investigation. But as Reynolds studied the paper more closely, a pattern began to emerge, a trail of breadcrumbs that led him down a darker path than he ever imagined. The transaction was linked to a shell company, a faceless entity that seemed to exist only on paper. But as Reynolds dug deeper, he discovered the company was connected to a web of secret organizations, each one more enigmatic than the last. And at the center of that web, like a spider spinning a deadly trap, was a name he had become all too familiar with: the Illuminated Order. Reynolds heard the whispers, rumors of a secret society that pulled the strings of power from behind the scenes. He always dismissed such talk as the stuff of conspiracy theories and paranoid delusions. But now, as he stared at the evidence before him, he couldn't deny the truth any longer. The Illuminated Order was real, and they had their fingers in every corner of the city's power structure. And if the evidence he uncovered was to be believed, they played a role in the murder of Councilman Michael Thornton. Reynolds leaned back in his chair. If the Order orchestrated Thornton's death, then the councilman's murder was more than just a simple homicide. It was a political assassination, a message sent by those who held the reins of power. He couldn't trust anyone with this information, not even his fellow officers. The Order's reach was too wide, their influence too deep. He would have to tread carefully, gathering evidence and building a case in secret, until he had enough to take them down. As he sat in his office, Reynolds promised himself he would not rest until he uncovered the truth behind Councilman Thornton's murder, no matter the cost. He would follow the trail to the very heart of their dark empire, and he would bring them to justice. Chapter 27. As the plane touched down on the rain-slicked tarmac of Heathrow Airport, Jade and David felt a rush of adrenaline. They arrived in London, the heart of an ancient empire, where the secrets of the Illuminated Order lay waiting to be uncovered. The multiple languages, the whir of luggage carousels, and the distant roar of jet engines created a disorienting backdrop as they scanned the sea of faces around them. Each passing glance, each fleeting expression, was analyzed with a meticulous eye, searching for any hint of recognition or malicious intent. Their first stop was a building located at 33 Cannon Street, in the heart of London's financial district. The building, known as Cannon Place, was a glass and steel structure that seemed to blend into the cityscape, belying the secrets that lay within its walls. As Jade and David approached the entrance, they took a moment to compose themselves. The contact they were about to meet, known only as Raphael, held the key to unlocking the Order's activities in London. With a deep breath, they stepped through the revolving doors and into the lobby of Cannon Place. The space was a study in understated elegance, with polished marble floors, sleek metal accents, and a sweeping reception desk manned by a solitary guard. The air was filled with soft conversation and the distant ding of elevators, the everyday sounds of corporate life masking the true nature of their visit. The elevator ride to the 14th floor seemed to stretch on forever, the confined space filled with a tense, electric silence. When the doors slid open, they found themselves in a hallway, the walls lined with anonymous doors and the air heavy with the weight of secrets untold. As they approached the office of their contact, Jade and David exchanged a loaded glance. With a final, steadying breath, David raised his hand and knocked on the door. Moments later, the door swung open. On the other side, Raphael, a man with a reputation for international espionage, stood before them, his face an inscrutable mask of professionalism. Raphael's office was a study in opulence and strategic discretion. The space was modest in size, belying the true scope of his influence and reach. The walls, lined with dark, richly grained wood paneling, created an atmosphere of warmth and sophistication. A large antique mahogany desk dominated the room, its polished surface adorned with high-tech gadgets and encrypted communication devices. Behind the desk, a floor-to-ceiling window offered a breathtaking view of the London skyline, a reminder of the city's vast and complex network of power and influence. A vintage world map hung on one wall, marked with a series of symbols and notations only Raphael could decipher. On another wall, a set of ancient, leather-bound books sat on a shelf, their titles obscured by a thin layer of dust that suggested they hadn't been touched in years. "Come in," he said. "We have much to discuss, and time is not on our side." Raphael was a nervous-looking man with shifty eyes and a twitchy demeanor. He reached into his leather satchel and pulled out a thick, brown envelope, the edges frayed and the surface marred by coffee stains and creases. With a glance over his shoulder, as if checking for any signs of unwanted observers, he slid the envelope across the table to Jade and David. "Everything I have on the Order's operations in the city," he said. "I've managed to gather intel on some of their key players, including a few high-ranking members. There's names, addresses, and even some photos of them attending secret meetings." He paused, licking his dry lips before continuing. "I've also got a list of suspected front companies and shell corporations they use to funnel money and resources. It's not a complete picture, but it's a start. Also, addresses for a few of their safe houses and storage facilities scattered throughout the city." Raphael's eyes darted back and forth, his voice dropping even lower. "I managed to intercept some of their financial records too. Bank statements, transaction logs, and encrypted files that I haven't been able to crack yet. Not the full scope of their financial network, but it's enough to give you an idea of the scale of their operations." His shoulders slumped, as if a weight was lifted from them. "It's not much, I know. The Order is notoriously secretive, and getting any information on them is like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. But it's a start, a foundation for you to build on as you dig deeper into their activities." Jade and David pored over the file, scanning the pages with a fierce intensity. The information was in fragments and incomplete, but it was enough to give them a sense of the scope of the Order's influence. There were shell companies and front organizations, dummy corporations and secret bank accounts. There were names of politicians and businessmen, socialites and celebrities, all connected by a web of money and power that stretched across the globe. A picture began to emerge of a city within a city, a secret realm where the Illuminated Order held sway. They would have to encounter this dark underbelly if they hoped to uncover the truth behind the Order's global agenda. Over the next few days, Jade and David followed the leads in the file, chasing down whispers and rumors in hidden corners of the city. They posed as wealthy investors and influential power brokers, using their aliases to gain access to the inner circles of London's elite. Chapter 28. The ballroom of the Ritz London was a sea of elegance and opulence, a glittery tableau of wealth and power. Jade and David moved through the crowd like two predators, their eyes searching the faces of the assembled guests for any sign of their prey. Jade was dressed in a black gown that clung to her curves like a second skin, her dark hair swept up in an elegant chignon that exposed the graceful curve of her neck. She carried herself with the easy confidence of a woman born to wealth and privilege, her smile dazzling as she greeted the other guests. At her side, David projected an air of sophistication in a tailored tuxedo. His hair cut low and his eyes shined with a dangerous charm. He played the role of the successful businessman to perfection, his every gesture and word calculated to project an air of power and influence. As they mingled with the cream of London's high society, Jade and David kept their ears open for any whisper of the Order's presence. They listened in on conversations about politics and finance, about art and culture and the latest gossip from the city's most exclusive circles. Somewhere in this throng of people, there were members of the Order, men and women who held the fate of nations in their hands. As the evening wore on and the champagne flowed, Jade was drawn into a conversation with a woman named Amelia, the daughter of a prominent British politician. Amelia was charming and vivacious, with quick wit and a sharp intellect. Jade sensed there was something more to Amelia than what she presented. She had a glow in her eye, secrets that lurked just beneath the surface. "Tell me, Sophia," Amelia said, using Jade's alias with a smile. "What brings you to London? Business or pleasure?" Jade laughed, the sound light and airy. "A little of both, I suppose. My husband and I are always on the lookout for new opportunities." Amelia's smile widened, and she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And have you found any interesting opportunities here in London?" Excitement culminated in Jade's chest. She was on the verge of a breakthrough. "We're always open to new possibilities," she said, "especially if they involve people of influence and power." "Well then, you've certainly come to the right place. London is full of people who know how to wield power, if you know where to look." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small, embossed business card, pressing it into Jade's hand with a meaningful look. "If you and your husband are interested in exploring some of those possibilities, come to this address tomorrow evening. I think you'll find it very enlightening." With that, Amelia melted back into the crowd, leaving Jade standing alone with the card in her hand. She glanced down at it. The address was in one of the oldest and most exclusive neighborhoods in London, a place where the wealthy and powerful held court for centuries. Jade slipped the card into her purse. She knew they were one step closer to uncovering the secrets of the Illuminated Order. It was at a private art gallery opening where they first encountered the man who would become one of their most valuable allies. Jade analyzed the crowd, landing on a man across the room. At first glance, he looked like any other well-dressed patron. Expensive suit, easy smile, flute of champagne in hand. But there was something else about him, an air of alertness, of coiled potential energy that put Jade on edge. As she watched, the man's eyes roamed the gallery almost imperceptibly, cataloging every exit, weighing every potential threat. His movements were self-assured yet economical, each gesture stripped of any wasted motion. This was no idle socialite killing time. This was a predator stalking his prey. "David," Jade mumbled under her breath. "The man by the Warhol print. Do you see him?" "I see him. There's something off about the way he moves. Military training, possibly intelligence. If I had to venture a guess, I'd say he's MI6. As if on cue, Ashford drained his flute and began weaving through the crowd towards them, a shark catching the faint copper scent of blood in the water. Up close, the man's aura of quiet, assured menace was even more evident. Sophia Steele and Milton Ashton, I presume? His cut-glass received pronunciation accent caressed the syllables with a sort of casual arrogance. Forgive me for being so dreadfully direct, but we have some matters of grave importance to discuss. Jade and David exchanged a glance. They'd been careful to maintain their cover identities, and the fact that Ashford knew their aliases was a red flag. Jade refused to be cowed, fixing him with a level stare. I'm afraid you have us at a disadvantage, Mr. Ashford. James Ashford. He extended a hand calloused by decades of service. But you already knew that, didn't you, Mr. Ashton? David's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about. Ashford's smile widened. Come now, Mr. Ashton. We both know you and your lovely wife are not here for the art. You're investigating the Illuminated Order, and I can help you. We've been tracking your movements for months now, Ashford continued. Ever since you first started poking that clever nose of yours into matters that should have remained undisturbed. He leaned in, his voice thick with the promise of untold secrets. The Illuminated Order has been a thorn in the side of His Majesty's government for longer than you can possibly imagine. We know they're planning something momentous here in London. The first domino in a larger campaign of manipulation and destabilization. Ashford's eyes bored into Jade's with the intensity of a killing stare. Make no mistake, Miss Steele. We want to stop them just as badly as you do. But we'll need to work together if we want any hope of succeeding where so many others before us have failed. He paused. And time is rapidly running out. Jade and David exchanged another glance. They couldn't trust him, not yet, but they also couldn't afford to turn down any potential leads. I suppose you're wondering how I knew who you were and how to find you, he said. The thought crossed our minds, Jade replied. James laughed. You have to understand, the Order isn't just a concern for the United States. So you've been watching us, gathering intelligence on our movements and our findings? We have. And I must say, I've been impressed by your tenacity and your resourcefulness. You've managed to uncover secrets that have eluded us for years, to connect dots we never even knew existed. But why come to us now? David said. Why not reach out earlier, when we were still in the States? Because the stakes have never been higher. The meeting you witnessed last night was just the tip of the iceberg. There are forces at work here that even I don't fully understand. Players moving on a chessboard that span the globe. He fixed them with a piercing stare. But one thing is clear. If we don't act now, if we don't find a way to stop the Order's plans, the consequences could be catastrophic. And that's where you come in. With your skills, your knowledge, and your determination, you may be the only ones who can unlock the secrets of the Illuminated Order and bring them to light. With those words, he pressed a small card into Jade's hand. Meet me at this address tomorrow, and we'll talk further. I think you'll find that I can be a very valuable ally. He melted back into the crowd, leaving Jade and David alone with their thoughts. They were taking a risk by trusting Ashford, but they needed all the help they could get. As they made their way out of the gallery and into the cool London night, they were aware the Order had eyes and ears everywhere, and their every move was being monitored. Chapter 29. Jade sipped her coffee as she watched David pore over the thick dossier on their new ally, a dossier compiled by none other than MI6 itself. You know, for an intelligence agency that prides itself on discretion, they sure don't mind documenting their own history, she mused. Maybe it's their way of ensuring their legacy lives on, David said. You have to admit, it's a compelling one. He turned a page, his expression growing more pensive. Listen to this. The roots of MI6 trace back to the late 19th century, an informal Secret Service bureau tasked with cultivating informants and stealing intelligence about the British Empire's rivals and threats abroad. As David recounted the twisting path that led to the modern Secret Intelligence Service's formation, Jade found herself transfixed. She learned of the crucial role MI6 played in both World War I and II, running deception operations and infiltrating enemy networks with legendary operatives like Lady Spy Gertrude Bell. They were instrumental in finally bringing down the Nazi regime, David said, including securing a copy of Hitler's last will and testament that proved invaluable. He shook his head in admiration. After the war, it was a new front against the Soviets and the spread of communist influence worldwide. High-profile defectors, pioneering new techniques, MI6 was at the vanguard of realigning the entire global chessboard in those Cold War years. Flipping ahead, David's voice took on a somber tone. Of course, it hasn't all been triumph after triumph. There have been more than a few controversies and scandals that get glossed over in this official narrative. Jade held up a hand. I'm sure there have been. No intelligence service's hands can be completely clean after decades of operating in the shadows. She exhaled slowly. What matters now is how deep their present-day investment is in uncovering and stopping the Illuminated Order's schemes. David nodded. Well, according to these records, that obsession goes back over 70 years to the waning days of World War II, when Allied forces first uncovered hints of the Order's involvement with the worst excesses of Nazi cruelty and ambition. As David recounted the agency's generational commitment to shining light onto the Order's darkest secrets, no matter how murky or far-flung the front lines may be, Jade realized they may have finally found the ally they needed, an ally born from the same embers of conspiracy that gave rise to the diabolical force they were now battling. She just hoped when the time came to confront the Illuminated Order's existence, MI6 would have the fortitude and perseverance to see the fight through to its bitter conclusion, no matter the cost. Chapter 30. In a room, deep in the heart of a centuries-old manor in the exclusive Belgravia district of London, a group of individuals stood around a mahogany table. At the head of the table was Sir William Hastings, a distinguished gentleman with silver hair and striking blue eyes. He was the leader of the Illuminated Order's London chapter, a man whose influence reached the highest echelons of British society. My dear friends, he began, his voice a rich, sonorous baritone, the time has come for us to set in motion the final phases of our grand plan. For too long, the world has been mired in chaos and uncertainty, lacking the guiding hand of enlightened leadership. But soon, the Illuminated Order will step out of the shadows and take its rightful place as the architects of a new global order. To his right, Miss Victoria Sterling. She was the Order's master manipulator, a woman who could bend the wills of even the most powerful men with a mere whisper and a smile. As Victoria took her seat at the table, her mind drifted to the past, to the moment that set her on this path. She was a young woman then, barely out of college, when she first learned of her family's long-standing ties to the Illuminated Order. Her father, a powerful businessman with a ruthless streak, groomed her from a young age to take his place within the Order's ranks. He drilled into her the importance of power, of control, and of the sacrifices that must be made to maintain them. But Victoria had her own reasons for embracing the Order's cause. She'd seen firsthand the corruption and weakness of those who claimed to lead, the politicians and bureaucrats who were too spineless to make the hard choices. The Order offered a different path, a way to shape the world to her will and create a future where the strong ruled over the weak. Our influence has never been stronger, she said. The media, the entertainment industry, the halls of academia, all dance to our tune, shaping the hearts and minds of the masses to our purpose. The stage is set for a cultural revolution, one that will pave the way for our ascendancy. Across from her was Mr. Jameson Shaw, his youthful features belying the razor-sharp intellect that made him the Order's rising star. As the mastermind behind their cutting-edge technology initiatives, he held the key to unlocking the next frontier of human potential. Jameson leaned back in his chair as he listened to his fellow members discuss their latest plans. He'd always been a loyal soldier of the Order, a tech prodigy who used his skills to further their cause without question. But lately, he found himself plagued by doubts, by a nagging sense that the Order's methods were becoming ruthless and indiscriminate. He thought of the lives that were ruined, the innocent who'd become collateral damage in the Order's quest for power. He joined the Order because he believed in their vision of a better world, a world where reason and enlightenment triumphed over chaos and ignorance. But now, as he sat in this room, surrounded by people who seemed all too eager to spill blood in the name of their cause, he wondered if they'd lost their way. Our advances in artificial intelligence and biotechnology are poised to reshape society, he said, his eyes alight with a fervent intensity. Imagine a world where the lines between man and machine are blurred, where the limits of the human mind and body are cast aside in pursuit of a higher purpose. That world is within our grasp, and it will be the Illuminated Order that ushers it in. Finally, Miss Cassandra Blackwell spoke. As the Order's spiritual guide and oracle, she held sway over the deepest mysteries and darkest secrets of the human soul. The ancient prophecies are aligning, she said, her eyes distant and unfocused. The stars themselves bear witness to the dawning of a new age, one in which the true believers will rise from the ashes of the old world. She paused, focusing on her fellow council members. For too long, the Illuminated Order has been shackled by the constraints of secrecy and subterfuge. But the time has come for us to step out of the shadows and claim our rightful place as the architects of humanity's future. Cassandra's voice took on a note of fervor, a hint of the zealotry that drove her every action. The children of the light are the beating heart of the Order, the true guardians of the ancient wisdom and the sacred mysteries. We are the ones who will lead the Order into a new era of enlightenment and transcendence, shedding the chains of the past and embracing the glorious destiny that awaits us. Her eyes flashed with intensity. But there are those within the Order who would stand in our way, those who cling to the old ways and fear the power of true revelation. They are the rot that must be purged, the cancer that must be excised before it can spread and corrupt all that we have built. Cassandra smiled, equal parts seductive and terrifying. The children of the light will be the instrument of that purification, the cleansing flame that will burn away the impurities and leave only the shining core of truth. And those who oppose us, those who seek to thwart our sacred mission, they will be consumed by the fire of our righteousness, reduced to ash and scattered on the winds of change. Sir William Hastings smiled. Indeed, my friends, the pieces are in place, the board is set. All that remains is for us to make our final moves, to strike at the heart of the old order and watch as it crumbles to dust. He rose from his seat. The Illuminated Order has guided the course of human history for centuries, working from the shadows to shape the destiny of nations. But now, the time has come for us to step into the light, to claim our birthright as the true masters of the world. Knowledge is our currency, secrecy, our shield. In silence, we govern. In darkness, we yield. As the meeting came to a close, Victoria noticed the subtle glances and gestures exchanged between Jameson and Cassandra. It was clear there was a history there, alliances and rivalries that extended beyond the walls of this room. Cassandra always resented Victoria's influence within the Order, seeing her as a threat to her own ambitions, and Jameson, for all his brilliance, was still just a pawn in their games, a tool to be used and discarded as necessary. But Victoria was no fool. She learned long ago to play the game of power, to navigate the treacherous currents of the Order's inner circle with a deft hand and a ruthless heart. She would not be outmaneuvered, not by Cassandra or anyone else. The future of the Order, and of the world itself, depended on her ability to stay one step ahead of her rivals. The meeting adjourned, and the 4 members of the Order went their separate ways. The endgame was upon them, the final battle between the forces of secrecy and revelation, tradition and progress, darkness and light. And in the heart of London, the Illuminated Order prepared to unleash its most audacious plan yet, a scheme that would reshape human civilization and bring about a new era of enlightenment, one in which they alone would hold the reins of power and the keys to the future. Chapter 31. Jade and David continued to navigate the waters of London's secret societies and hidden agendas. They found themselves drawn ever deeper into a web of conspiracy and intrigue. With each passing day, they uncovered new pieces of the puzzle, their investigation leading them closer and closer to the heart of the Illuminated Order's dark designs. It was a rainy afternoon when they finally discovered the truth that would change everything. They'd been following a lead from James Ashford, their MI6 contact, and it brought them to a building in the city. As they made their way inside, posing as potential clients for a front company, they found themselves in a small, cramped room, surrounded by stacks of papers and computer screens. It was there, amidst the chaos of the office, that they found the file that would blow the lid off the Illuminated Order's plans. It was an innocuous-looking document, buried beneath a pile of financial reports and business proposals. As Jade and David pored over its contents, their eyes widening with each passing moment, they realized they stumbled on a bombshell. The file detailed a plan, years in the making, for a global event that would reshape society. It was a scheme so audacious, so far-reaching, that it took their breath away. The Illuminated Order, it seemed, was not content with just pulling the strings of power from behind the scenes. They wanted to fundamentally alter the course of human history, to create a new world order in their own image. The plan involved a series of coordinated attacks, staged in cities around the world, that would sow chaos and confusion on a scale never before seen. Governments would fall, economies would collapse, and entire nations would be plunged into anarchy. And in the midst of the mayhem, the Illuminated Order would emerge as the saviors of humanity, the only force capable of restoring order and stability to a world gone mad. Jade and David sat in stunned silence. They'd always known the Order was powerful, but this was beyond anything they ever imagined. They had to act fast. They had to find a way to stop the Order's plan before it was too late, but they were against an enemy with resources and influence beyond their wildest dreams. Chapter 32. The room was suffocating as Detective Marcus Reynolds sat across from his longtime mentor and superior, Chief of Police John Thompson. The chief's office, usually a place of respect and admiration, felt like a cage, trapping Reynolds in a web of politics and deceit. Chief Thompson stared at Reynolds, a mixture of disappointment and regret on his face. The fluorescent lights overhead accentuated the deep lines of stress and fatigue on his forehead. "Detective Reynolds," he said, "I'm afraid I have no choice but to place you on administrative leave, effective immediately." Reynolds' heart sank. "But why, Chief? I've given everything to this case, to finding justice for Councilman Thornton. You can't just pull me off now, not when I'm so close to the truth." Chief Thompson sighed. "It's not about your dedication, Marcus. It's about your methods, your obsession with this case. You've gotten too personal, too involved. It's clouding your judgment and putting the entire investigation at risk. With all due respect, sir, that's bullshit. I've followed every lead, every protocol. I've done everything by the book. This isn't about my judgment. It's about politics, isn't it? Someone higher up wants me gone, wants me to back off. Watch your tone, detective. I won't have you making baseless accusations in my office. This decision comes from me and me alone. It's for your own good, and for the good of the department." Reynolds shot up from his chair. "For my own good? I thought you had my back, Chief. I thought you believed in the work we were doing, in the truth we were fighting for." The chief rose to meet him. "I do believe in the truth. But I also believe in the chain of command, in the integrity of this department. If you can't trust my decisions, then maybe you don't belong here after all." Reynolds felt like he'd been slapped. The chief's words hit him like a blow to the gut. He took a step back, his eyes searching Thompson's face for any sign of the mentor he once knew, the man who taught him everything about being a good cop. But all he saw was a stranger, a man he no longer recognized. In that moment, something dawned on him, a truth he'd been too blind to see before. "You're one of them, aren't you?" Reynolds asked. "The Order. They got to you. That's what this is really about. I don't know what you're talking about, but I suggest you take some time off, clear your head. Don't make this any harder than it needs to be." Reynolds shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "I used to look up to you, Chief. I used to think you were the one man in this city who couldn't be bought, who couldn't be corrupted. But now I see the truth. You're just another pawn in their game, another puppet dancing on their strings." He turned to leave, his hand on the doorknob, his back to the man he once called a friend. "I won't stop, Chief. I won't rest until I expose the truth, until I bring the Illuminated Order to justice. And if that means going through you to do it, then so be it. In the confines of his office, Reynolds leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the ceiling as he tried to make sense of it all. He always believed in the system, in the idea that justice would prevail no matter what. But now, he was beginning to understand just how naive he'd been. The Order's reach extended far beyond anything he imagined. They were a hydra, a monster with 1,000 heads, and he'd been foolish enough to think he could take them on alone. As he sat there, lost in thought, a knock at the door jolted him back to reality. He looked up, and a familiar face stood in the doorway, a man he'd come to know as a friend and a confidant. It was Detective Sanchez, who'd been helping Reynolds on the Thornton case from the beginning. Sanchez had a grim expression on his face, his eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "I heard about the suspension," he said. "It's bullshit, and we both know it." Reynolds nodded, a bitter smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, well, that's the way the game's played, I guess. The Order doesn't like it when people start poking around in their business. Listen, I know this is a tough blow, but you can't give up. You're onto something big here, something that could blow the lid off this whole damn thing." Reynolds sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know, Sanchez. Maybe I should just walk away. Let someone else take up the fight." "No way, man. You're the only one who can see this through. You've got the skills, the knowledge, and the guts to take these bastards down, and I'll be with you every step of the way." Reynolds looked up at his friend. Sanchez was right. He couldn't turn his back on this fight, no matter how hard it got. Chief John Thompson hung up the phone, his jaw clenched tight as he replayed the conversation in his mind. He was a man used to giving orders, not taking them. A light rap on the door broke his trance. "Come in," his voice gruffer than intended. His secretary poked her head in. "Sir, line 2 for you. They say it's urgent." Thompson frowned. He knew who was on the other end of that line. With a curt nod, he waved her away and lifted the receiver. "This is Thompson," he answered. "John." The voice on the other end was clipped, precise, a voice used to deference. "I trust my instructions have been carried out regarding Detective Reynolds." Thompson's free hand clenched into a fist on the desktop. "Your boy's been put out to pasture, like you asked. Suspended indefinitely for crossing professional lines on the Councilman Thornton case." "Excellent. And I have your assurance he'll be dissuaded from continuing his extracurricular pursuits during this hiatus?" A muscle ticked in Thompson's cheek. "Yeah, you have my assurance. Guy's a bloodhound, but even he knows to obey the leash when it's yanked tight enough." "See that he does," the person on the other end replied. "Reynolds has already stumbled too close to certain sensitive operations for my comfort. The last thing we need is a testosterone-addled detective poking around where he shouldn't." Thompson bristled at the insult, barely biting back a heated retort. He was the chief of police, not some errand boy to get sneered at by. The voice cut through his thoughts like a scalpel. "I'm trusting I'm making myself unmistakably clear, Chief Thompson. Our friends have worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let one man's misguided moral crusade threaten the grand design. Not when we are so. Damn. Close." Thompson swallowed hard, anger replaced by a sliver of ice trailing down his spine. "Crystal clear," he said. "Reynolds is a dead end. I'll make sure of it. You got nothing to worry about on my end." "For all our sakes," the person agreed. "I certainly hope that's the case. Good day, Chief." The line went dead, leaving Thompson alone with the bitter taste of his compromised position. Somehow, after decades of unblemished service and adherence to the virtues he once held so dear, he'd become just another crooked cop on the take. A willing conscript in some grand scheme he couldn't begin to fathom. As he reached for the glass paperweight, a gift from his wife on his first promotion, the words carved into the steel began to blur behind a sheen of unshed tears.